Let's pray. Guide, we beseech thee, Almighty God, members of this honorable house, that they would wisely deliberate for the good of this country and for the glory of thy holy name. I invite everyone in the house to join me in the Lord's Prayer. Our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our trespasses as we forgive those who trespass against us. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. For thine is the kingdom, the power, and the glory, forever and ever. Amen. Pray, be seated. This honorable house now commences.
Item 3, oath of allegiance or affirmation for new member. Item 4, confirmation of minutes.
Leader of government business.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I wish to move that the minutes of the proceedings of a sitting of the House of Representatives held at Parliament Chamber, Mount Weldale, St. George's, on Tuesday, the 18th of July, 2023, be taken as read.
Honourable members, the question is that the minutes of the proceedings of a sitting of the House of Representatives held at the Parliament Chamber, Mount Weldale, St. George's, on Tuesday, 18 July 2023, at 9 a.m. be taken as read. As many of that opinion, say aye. Of the contrary opinion, say no. The ayes have it. Indeed, the ayes have it. Leader of government business.
Mr. Speaker, I wish to propose one amendment to the minutes. I recognize that there is a typo. I refer you, Mr. Speaker, to page 4 of the minutes, otherwise captured in the continuous minutes, page number 121. That penultimate sentence, it reads, the question that is asked here is relating to June 2023. Mr. Speaker, I believe that should be June 2022 to May 2023.
June 2022?
Yes, Mr. Speaker.
June 2023?
Yes, Mr. Speaker.
Okay, so that is Good morning. Honorable MP for St. Patrick West.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Good morning to you and good morning to colleagues on both sides. Mr. Speaker, I'm not too clear on the paragraph on page 5. That's 1, 2, 3, fourth from bottom, regarding a query made by the Honorable Member for St. Andrew Northeast concerning offices for caretakers. The line that says she mentioned that no office was allocated to her constituency. I'm not sure if that is reflective of what the Honorable Member did say.
Okay.
Page 5. Fourth from bottom. 1, 2, 3. Fourth paragraph from bottom, beginning Honorable Kate Lewis.
just give the Honorable MP for Zenandio Northeast a couple seconds so she could confirm whether or not it's properly conveyed, the message is properly conveyed there. This is what you meant?
Yes,
Okay,
caretaker offices, so it's correct.
okay. Honorable MP for St. Patrick West, she said this is exactly what she meant. We won't spend time on meaning here. We'll move on. Meaning can be there to elsewhere. Once this is exactly what she meant, we can deal with the interpretation of it thereafter. Leader of Government Business.
Mr. Speaker, respectfully, I believe that that observation might not fit the current matter being discussed, which is the minutes of the House of Representatives held on July 18th. I believe the Honorable Minister is referring to the minutes of the Standing Committee on Finance, which cannot be taken here, Mr. Speaker. Thank you.
Leader of Government Business.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I beg to move that the minutes of the proceedings of a sitting of the House of Representatives held at Parliament Chamber, Mount Weldale, St. George's, on Tuesday, the 16th of July, 2023, at 9 a.m., be confirmed.
Honorable members, the question is that the minutes of the proceedings of a sitting of the House of Representatives held at the Parliament Chamber, Mount Weldale, St. George's, on Tuesday, the 18th July, 2023, at 9 a.m. be confirmed. All those who have that opinion, say aye. Those of the contrary opinion, say no. Indeed, the ayes have it. The ayes have it.
Item 5, messages from the Governor General. Item 6, announcement by Mr. Speaker.
Honorable members, just to inform this House that the Honorable Andy Williams, I've been advised, has been out of state and perhaps still is, and will not be with us today. Just to remind members as well that in the previous sitting I indicated that the House of Parliament has planned a scheduled visit of MPs to secondary schools, and just to inform the House that the schedule is completed. So we'll make the schedule available to the MPs. This is exactly what is proposed by the House. If you have any adjustment that you wish to make, please convey it back to us. But the schedule of visits of MPs to schools in the last week of September this year has been completed. So we've assigned the MPs to schools. But we still have this window where you can say, can you have me in school X or Y? But there's a reason to our assignment. You would see it when it comes to you. So I just reminded the MPs that you need to make sure your calendar is free during that period, because we want all the MPs to be in our secondary schools at the same time. Thank you.
Item 7, Presentation of petitions. Item 8, presentation of papers and reports from select committees.
Leader of Government Business.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I wish to present the following papers and reports from select committees to this Honorable House. Firstly, Mr. Speaker, I wish to present the supplementary estimates of expenditure for 2023 as approved by the Finance Committee at its meeting of 18th August 2023. Secondly, Mr. Speaker, the media review report as approved by Cabinet pursuant to Section 25(3) of the Public Finance Management Act, number 17 of 2015, together with the supplementary budget in accordance with Section 23. Also, Mr. Speaker, I present the opinion of the Cabinet pursuant to Section 25, subsection 2 and 3 of the Public Finance Management Act. Fourthly, I present the minutes of the proceedings of a meeting of the Standing Committee on Finance held at the Parliament Chamber, Mount Weldale, St. George's, on Friday the 18th of August 2023 at 10 a.m. And finally, the minutes of the Committee of Privileges held on the 18th of August 2023 at 12:25 p.m. at the office of the Speaker, who presided over this meeting as Chairman of the Committee of Privileges of the House of Parliament. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you, Leader of Government Business. Honorable members, these documents are now laid before the House.
Item 9, unopposed private business. Item 10, questions.
Honorable Leader of His Majesty Opposition.
Mr. Speaker, just standing to excuse me, to ask question number 1 to the Minister, Honorable Minister of Finance. This is standing in my name. Just to make the point, Mr. Speaker, since the original order paper did not so indicate, and only yesterday that was pointed out to me, and had the opportunity to look, have a glance at the response. As I said before, these questions and the answers must be there sufficient time so that we can go through them. I keep repeating that over and over. I seek your indulgence, Mr. Speaker, that to see that that is done so that we can do our work appropriately. So question number 1, standing in my name, to Honorable Minister of Finance.
Honorable.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and good morning to the entire House.
Morning, Honorable Minister.
Mr. Speaker, I want to put on the table that I have provided a response to the question asked by the Leader of His Majesty Opposition. Again, I wanted to reiterate that the answers to those questions, I had to go through the Cabinet Secretary to get those information because it does not reside with the Ministry of Finance, as I said before. And I only recently received that information, which is less than a week ago, and therefore it was impossible for me to provide the answers prior to the time I provided yesterday. Thank you.
All right, so Honorable MP, just wait on the speaker, please. So you did provide the response. All right. What the Honorable member did comment on is the need for the answer, the response coming to him with a little bit more time so he can give consideration to. So I appeal to the members to try and respond, giving whoever asked the question some time to study the responses before they come to the House. Thank you.
Mr. Speaker, just to add, I'm not sure that we both blamed similarly on the response of the minister. I think he said that the information was given only yesterday and he hadn't sufficient time. So he didn't say, I didn't think he said he submitted.
He did. I asked him and he said yes.
He did?
Yes.
Okay.
So let's move on.
Okay, so standing question number 2, standing my name to the Honorable Minister of Finance.
Honorable Leader of the Opposition.
Yes.
You would need to look at the responses sent to you before you proceed with these additional questions.
No, Mr. Speaker, clearly that's not necessary. I want time to digest, Mr. Speaker. I wouldn't have the time here, and I wouldn't think the Parliament should be held up for me to do so. That doesn't make much sense, to due respect.
Correct.
Okay? Correct. So question number 2, standing in my name to the Honorable Minister of Finance.
All right, Honorable Leader of His Majesty Opposition, I'm not sure you are looking at the same other people that I am watching, right? Mine has no questions. My other paper has no questions on them, right? I want you to listen to me, please, right? The point that I'm making is that I'm informed the answer to all the questions have been provided to your office or to you. Okay? So, like you indicated earlier on, Parliament should not spend time trying to get oral answers to answers that have already been submitted to the office of His Majesty Opposition. That's my point.
Should I respond? Can I respond? Mr. Speaker? I'm asking you.
Do you understand? No, Honorable MP, you just wait. That the Speaker didn't invite you to stand.
Well, no, I'm asking you, and you're not saying anything, Mr. Speaker.
Right. So, no, I just commented, Honorable MP, I just commented, and I said the answers were provided, right? But you want to respond?
Yes.
Go ahead. Go ahead, Honorable MP.
Mr.
Go ahead.
Speaker, but I'm not, I think we are clearly in a different platform here, Mr. Speaker. I really suggest maybe we need to have a meeting, because I see some serious concern, and I don't think the Parliament time should be wasted with my difference with your views. And I think it's important, extremely important, because therefore, if I don't get that opportunity, then I may have to use the Parliament time, and I don't think it's appropriate to do so at this particular time.
Agreed. So let's proceed. Agreed. Honorable MP, agree with you. You continue.
Item 11, urgent questions under the provisions of Standing Order number 21, notice of questions. Item 12, statement by ministers. Item 13, personal explanations. Item 14, motions.
Mr. Speaker,
Honorable MP for St. Patrick East and Minister of Finance.
thank you, Mr. Speaker. I stand at this point in time, Mr. Speaker, standing in my name, to present two motions before this Honorable House here today. I'll take them one after the other. The first motion reads as follows. Whereas it was necessary to provide for the services of the State of Grenada for the year 2023 by means of a Supplementary Appropriation Act, be it resolved that the Supplementary Appropriation Act 2023 for the period 1st January to 31st December 2023 be approved. Mr. Speaker.
Yes, sir. So, honourable members, the question is, whereas it was necessary to provide for the services of the State of Grenada for the year 2023 by means of a Supplementary Appropriation Act, be resolved that the Supplementary Appropriation Act 2023 for the period 1st January to 31st December 2023 be approved. MP for St. Patrick East.
Mr. Speaker, the Act seeks to appropriate an additional sum of $148,990,234 EC to the service of the State of Grenada for the fiscal year 1st January to 31st December 2023. An appropriation bill shall be introduced in the House of Representatives provided for the issue of the sums from the Consolidated Fund and appropriating them for the purpose specified therein. Notwithstanding Section 1, Item I, no more than 2 supplementary appropriation bills may be submitted to the House of Representatives within a fiscal year. Taking note of this reality, Mr. Speaker, I wish to state that the supplementary appropriation happens nearly every year, and Mr. Speaker, this is the first time for the year that a supplementary appropriation is being put before this House of Representatives. Mr. Speaker, I also wish to summarize what pertains in the supplementary bill for 2023. It includes a provision for $15,559,402 in recurrent expenditure and a total of $133,430,823 with a total of $148,990,234 for the year 2023. Mr. Speaker, the appropriation refers to several ministries, which I'll basically ask at some point in time that the ministers responsible for those line ministry to speak more to those items, and therefore I would not delve into them at this point in time. Notwithstanding that, I wish to point out that because the Ministry of Finance is the line ministry which I am responsible for, I'd like to speak to the fact that there is a provision of recurrent expenditure for $7,031,151 and a capital expenditure of $60,500,000, a total of $67,531,151. Again, Mr. Speaker, I would like to point out that at the Finance Committee meeting held on 18th of August, we would have gone into details, providing explanation for the rationale for those expenditure, and I would therefore not want to go into it at this stage, except there is a period where we can go into deals between those matters. And therefore, I would like to propose that at the right point in time, that the ministers gave support to the appropriation bill. Thank you.
Thank you, Honorable MP for St. Patrick East and Minister for Finance.
Mr. Speaker, I again stand to read the second motion that is proposed before this House here today. It is a resolution.
Just hold. We need to clear the first motion before going to the second. So I pause Honorable MP to allow for contribution from other members. This is why I pause. But once you present the first motion, we'll take it, we'll vote on it, and then go to the second. So I pause to leave room for debate or contribution. And I see a light on the other side. Honorable MP for the town of St. George.
Mr. Speaker, I rise to ask for some clarification. We did meet in a committee outside of the Parliament, strictly speaking, the House sitting, and we did go through the supplemental. I have no experience that tells me that in some way means that we don't have to have it presented to the House. So the members stood up and said we did it in our committee, so we should make comments, but we want to hear it here and get further information that was required and requested at the committee. But in any event, it has to be placed on the record in the Parliament presented by the member. I think they just stand and say, well, we did it last week, and therefore I want to hear what other people have to say. It's really not how I anticipate the parliamentary debate on a bill that caused us to spend over $150 or $40 million, how we had to proceed. So I was absolutely shocked. So I'm standing in shock, and as you notice, lost for words, because I would like to hear it put on the record. This is a record that's been made in a Hansard of the parliamentary debate on a supplementary bill that is nearly as big as what it used to be for budgets years ago. So I want it presented, and then I'll respond. You can't tell me go home and read the piece of paper you gave me next committee and then I'll come here and talk to the paper. We had a committee meeting totally outside of the parliamentary sitting. So if I am somehow wrong on the procedure, and that's a procedure that I was unaware of for the many years I've been here, then I'd like to be corrected. But to just say, well, we had it in a committee, so come on, I want to hear what you all have to say, and other members support it or don't support it. I find that really an affront to the parliamentary debate that we are expected to have, so that the people out there can hear what was presented, what other members believe, and what is our view on it. So I stand for clarification, not for debate on the issue raised by the member. And I hope somebody can clarify it. I know we have the most senior member here. Maybe he can give me clarification, but I haven't had time to talk to any of my colleagues on this. I stand because I was waiting to hear the presentation of what he's asking the House to do. Not what a committee was presented with the other day. What is he asking the House to do? I just can't say, well, go and read the paper, unless you are journalist for us to go and read it now. I'm just sorry for being lost for words. It is not normal for me to do that way.
Thank you, Honorable MP for the town of St. George. Ned Green. And Minister for Finance and MP for St. Patrick East.
Mr. Speaker.
Just hold, Honorable Member, just hold.
I'm lost. What I'm saying is, no, I want to reinforce the point you made.
All right. I was saying,
Mr. Speaker.
Honorable MP for St. Patrick East, before you stand, I just want to, I was responding to Honorable MP for the town of St. George as well. In my view, you presented, right? It's not what has been, perhaps in the words of the Honorable MP, has been experienced here. So the floor is open. Honorable MP for St. Patrick East and Minister for Finance, if there are some summary comments that you wish to make, it's fine, right? So that there is some clarity to the member and there is more food on the table, as it were. But the floor is open for contribution from all members with respect to the matter before us, right? So I saw the light of the Honorable MP for St. Patrick East, Minister of Finance, and so I invite you to stand.
Mr. Speaker, thank you. I am of the opinion that we are under motions. And under motions, I do not think that we are allowed to debate at this point in time. And therefore, I would wait until we get under the substantial matter under the bill for such debate to take place.
No, when a motion is tabled, there is room for discussion, debate, back and forth, and then it's voted on. Right? So this is the procedure that we follow. Somebody brings a motion, it's tabled in the House, the question is asked, there's room for members to make the contribution, and then we vote thereafter. Does that make sense? But this is the procedure for dealing with the motions. All right? So this is how we are going to deal with it, and then once we finish with motion A, then we wait on the movement of motion B. So we are still on A. Honorable Leader of the Opposition.
Mr. Speaker, as the MP for Town of St. George pointed out, I'm at loss. I'm at loss. I want to reinforce the point made by the member for the Town of St. George. This is the highest institution of the country. A motion is presented. At Finance Committee, there was some cursory explanation on a number of areas. In fact, we asked questions about details and breakdown, which was not given. This is the debate for a motion to pass a motion. And I'm at loss. After almost 40 years in this parliament, I have never seen this. And I've been in opposition on 2 occasions. And I've been in government a number of occasions. I have never seen this. So I just want to reinforce that point. We are doing a disservice to our people and our country. We are. And no one will be able to stop me from saying what I have to say. I can't believe what I'm saying. I just cannot believe it. I rest for the time being.
Thank you, Honorable Leader of His Majesty Opposition, Leader of Government Business.
Mr. Speaker, my light was on for quite a while because I basically was standing on a point of order because the substantive matter is debate on the motion. And so this really is unnecessary. The honorable member presented the motion and we are going to make our responses. So this is absolutely unnecessary. Further to this, Mr. Speaker, this particular bill can be the content of it, the bill which will come later, we can go into the details at that point if we so desire, as well as we can discuss the motions, or we can debate the motions at length here and now. There is really not a problem. So, Mr. Speaker, the opportunity is presented to us. We are going to be debating this motion here and now. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
All right, so Honorable MP for St. Andrew Southwest.
So, morning, Mr. Speaker. Morning to everybody. Mr. Speaker, I stand to give my full support to the supplementary estimates as presented by the member for St. Patrick's East. And as the member said, the opportunity will come when each member on this House would have a time to go further and provide explanation for each item of the supplementary that falls under his or her respective ministry. And therefore I see nothing wrong with that. I think this is in very good order, and therefore I can't understand the reason for the confusion. And therefore, what I will do right now, Mr. Speaker, is that I will proceed to provide some details of the items that fall under the Ministry of Economic Development, Planning, Tourism, ICT, and Creative Industry. So can I have some attention, please? Mr. Speaker, can I have some attention, please?
Honorable MP, Honorable MPs, Honorable Opposition MPs, gentlemen.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. So, Mr. Speaker, under the Ministry of Economic Development, Planning, Tourism, ICT, and Creative Economy, the supplementary estimate is for a total of $23.1 million, and they correspond to 4 projects. The first one has to do with SIAP, Climate Smart Agriculture Project, which you're all familiar with, in which $1.3 million is being provided as counterpart financing. We have ramped up the implementation of this project. We have a number of roads that we are implementing and for which contracts have been given out to start implementation as quickly as possible. So we have the Closure Road, we have the Parsons Road, we have a road presently under implementation, the Granton Road up in Willis. Okay. The OECS Competitiveness Tourism Project, this is a regional project. It involves on the greater side, a big portion of it has to do with the rehabilitation of the Fort George. And that project has started, it is in full swing. Good. We are going to, at the end of it all, make Fort George into a major tourism attractment site. Good. And just for the explanation, we have to demolish about 17 buildings. We have already demolished 6. Of course, I must say the contract has been awarded to a Colombian company, and that company is working locally with a local company, which is Sunrise. So we have already demolished 17. We have 6. We have to demolish around 17 buildings on the fort. We have done so for 6, and we have rebuilt 3. Good. In doing that, we want to maintain a lot of the history that has taken place on the fort. But on completion, Mr. Speaker, sir.
Just hold, Honorable Minister. Proceed, please.
On completion, We're going to have a museum at the fort. We're going to have booths where small entrepreneurs can sell the crafts and the handicrafts and the products. We're going to have a restaurant. We're going to have an area for cultural performance. And we're also going to have a lookout area, given the site of it, of the fort. Mr. Speaker, right now we are discussing the whole question of the management of that facility once it's completed. How we're going to go about manage and operating that facility. That is what is being discussed right now. We are expected to complete the project I think early next year, Mr. Speaker. In the first quarter of next year, we should have that project completed. The Creative Industry Symposium. Mr. Speaker, that $135,000 you see in there, just above that, is as a result of a meeting we had with Mrs. Stacy Kennedy Roberts, who is the manager of the Caribbean Latin American Bank office. They have a sub-office in Trinidad. And while we were attending IMF World Bank meetings in Washington, I think in April, we met with her and we told her about the symposium that we are having, and we kindly requested from her a grant to assist in the financing of that symposium. And immediately, the actions were taken for us to receive that grant. So in fact, we have already received that $50,000 grant to help us stage the symposium on which was a major success. It was spoken about all over the world, yeah? And we are now bringing this amount of money into account. And the other project, the final one, Mr. Speaker, is a digital governance resilience project. We commonly call it the DG4R project. This is an extremely important project, admittedly so, Mr. Speaker, aimed at digitizing the whole of Grenada. Starting, of course, with the government services and ensuring that our people, each and every Grenadian, is computer literate and of course can use a smartphone effectively. So with this project, Mr. Speaker, many of the activities of government will be virtual, as they say, digitized. Good. When we received that project, we did our own review of it, and we thought that a major component of it was missing, and that is the strategic role. We thought that there should be a strategy for the digitization of the government services and of Grenada, which was not included in the project. So we had a meeting with the World Bank. A local team went up, spent about 3-4 days with the World Bank team in Washington, discussed a redesigning of the project, and the World Bank agreed to provide the financing for the development of a national strategy for the digitization of the economy and of course the people of Grenada. Good? And they will pay for that consultancy as well. So that's a major addition to the project. But presently a number of things are taking place with the project. We have already started to digitize some aspects of government services in the Ministry of Legal Affairs. Some digitization is taking place there. With this project, Mr. Speaker, we want to have a national ID for every single Grenadian, a national ID. And then the time will come when we hope to make Wi-Fi access, if I may say, a public good, meaning that wherever you go, you will find it, you will have access to the internet, and of course you wouldn't have to pay for it. In the same way, you don't have to pay to walk the road. Mm-hmm. So these are the 4 major elements that comprise and the need for additional resources that falls under this supplementary estimate, so that we can have these projects completed on time and that we can satisfy the needs of our people in the respective areas to which the projects refer. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you, Honorable MP for St. Andrew North Southwest. All right, I sense there is no additional contribution to this particular motion. Oh, Honorable Prime Minister. I'm seeing two lights. I call the Prime Minister.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I rise in support of the motion moved by the Minister of Finance to have approved for the state of Grenada for the year January 2023 to December 2023 a total sum additional to that which was approved in the budget in December of 2022, an additional sum of $148,990,234. Mr. Speaker, the sum is split into recurrent expenditure of $559,402 recurrent expenditure, and capital expenditure of $133,430,832. Mr. Speaker, the sums, both recurrent and capital, are before the members of the House, and the appropriate ministries as well as the votes that the sums are allocated to are also before the members of the House. Perhaps, Mr. Speaker, for the purpose of the Hansard, it seems quite clear that the request to have this detailed and presented is perhaps what has caused some consternation this morning. So, Mr. Speaker, we start with the office of the Prime Minister. The recurrent sum sought there is a sum of $250,000, and the capital sum sought is a sum of $7,500,000. Mr. Speaker, the recurrent sum is made necessary because Grenada, Mr. Speaker, has agreed to host a pre-COP28 meeting of heads of government of CARICOM. Mr. Speaker, COP is the acronym not for police officers in America, but for the UN Conference of Parties, which treats with the issue of climate change. And Mr. Speaker, for several years now, every year, a singular major event is hosted by the UN in a different forum. Last year it was in Egypt, this year it is in Dubai. And so we may ask, Mr. Speaker, why the need for Grenada to host this pre-COP conference of CARICOM heads. Mr. Speaker, with the exception of Guyana and Belize and Suriname, well, CARICOM member states are made up of small islands with big ocean spaces who bear the brunt of the negative impacts of climate change. And I think in the case of Grenada, we see it all around, from the devastating effects of Hurricane Ivan in 2004 to the Sargassum plague, to the relentless destruction of our coastline caused by the ravages of the sea, rising sea levels, rising temperatures, which damages our coral and affects our fishing stock and the livelihood of our fishermen. And the Sargassum plague, I think we all know the challenges that in particular the east and northeastern coast of Grenada suffers from as a result of this. So, Mr. Speaker, one of the challenges we face as small island states is the fact that the big polluting countries, which have created this almost existential threat to mankind, despite all the talk, have not really put the resources or made the resources readily available to the entities that suffer the loss and damage. We don't have to argue about proving the loss and damage, because in the case of Grenada, for example, it's obvious, it's demonstrable. In the case of the Bahamas, when they had their hurricane, it was demonstrable. In the case of Dominica, it's demonstrable. When we have the volcanic eruption in St. Vincent, the damage is not limited to St. Vincent. The ash plumes reached Grenada as well. So, Mr. Speaker, this is really an opportunity for us as CARICOM heads to strategize with the view of going into COP 2028 with a single voice on on some of the major issues, particularly as it relates to things such as funding, loss and damage, and ensuring that we have access to financing so that we can address the issue of climate mitigation, climate adaptation, energy transition, etc. So, Mr. Speaker, this event was hosted in the Bahamas last year. Grenada has offered to host this year. COP is scheduled to take place in the latter part of November, the first week of December, in Dubai. And so we are seeking to have all our colleagues here together with the technical teams, the technocrats, so that we can really drill along on some of the areas that we need to address when we get to COP. Mr. Speaker, the other main item is the item of $7.5 million, which is on the capital, which means it's not recurrent. Mr. Speaker, this sum is an appropriation to address the 50th anniversary of Grenada's independence. Mr. Speaker, this is not merely a celebration, but a significant observance and milestone in the civilization of Grenada and our nation's history. And we may, in effect, say that until we became an independent state, our civilization did not exist. We were merely part of and remained a British colony, part of the British civilization, part of the British kingdom. And so 50 years ago, when Sir Eric Matthew Geary led Grenada into independence, we really were for the first time beginning our own civilization. I need not say, but it's obvious, there are Caribbean islands that are still colonies of the British, departments of the French, and territories of the United States of America. And so they do not have what we have here today, the right to stand in Parliament, to debate, to make laws for their own governance, their own determination of the way of life. And so, Mr. Speaker, we have this sum because we are going to underscore the importance, first of our independence, and second of the 50th anniversary observance of this. We intend, Mr. Speaker, to roll several events from September of this year all the way into, roll up several events from September of this year all the way into all of the calendar year 2024. We intend to have legacy projects, Mr. Speaker, that speaks towards ensuring that the future of Grenada, particularly when it comes to issues such as education, the teaching of Grenadian history, the observation and celebration of national heroes, the renaming of our streets, our important landmarks, the celebration of the life and works of all of our artists, be they literary, sporting, cultural, or writers, authors, all of the persons or playwrights who've contributed towards the building of Grenada, including our politicians, as well as significant members of the civil society and the business community. So, Mr. Speaker, some of the events obviously would require significant preparatory expenditure. I did mention at the committee stage, for instance, the fact that the commemorative $50 note is estimated to cost about $2 million, and that funding needs to be paid now so that the minters can proceed with completing the design and the preparation of the note. Mr. Speaker, we intend to recover the costs associated with the note, because obviously the note will become part of the currency, but obviously we would expect that Grenadians and Grenadians in the diaspora will buy it as memorabilia, and so we expect to recover the funding associated with this. Mr. Speaker, as is customary, when you have an event like that, you would have significant visiting dignitaries, and so obviously we also have to incur some expenditure for that. Additionally, Mr. Speaker, there's a National Celebrations Committee that is planning this. It has a representative from each parish. It also includes members from Her Majesty's opposition, a member from Her Majesty's opposition, Senator Cox. Mr. Speaker, we intend to ensure that the parishes get the appropriate attention as well, so that they can have the independence celebration, and that the parishes can get the opportunity to define what the parish wants to celebrate, what it wants to highlight, and so that each of us from other parishes can truly get to learn about the other parishes and be able to go and support the events when they're happening here. So, Mr. Speaker, we appreciate that the $7.5 million compared to other independence celebration events is demonstrably higher, but you don't get to 50 until you get to 50. Hence the reason, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, thanks. As well as part of the legacy, we look at, Mr. Speaker, is the possibility of raising a 50th anniversary bond from which we can get financing to address some of the major projects that we need to address in Grenada going forward. So that is also part of the 50th anniversary celebration. Mr. Speaker, the Ministry of Foreign Trade and Export Development, there's a capital appropriation there of $684,603. And Mr. Speaker, that sum is appropriated, Mr. Speaker, as part of the agri-food sector development and strengthening of the national food safety system. It is, in fact, Mr. Speaker, part of a grant, and so it's really there to put the sum on account and to be able to account for it. The next vote, Mr. Speaker, the FIU, it's a recurrent sum of $153,505. Mr. Speaker, the FIU as an institution is singularly important in a number of aspects, both in terms of cyber, e-commerce literacy amongst our population, to ensure that members of the population are aware of the threats associated with many of the financial transactions which take place online. They're also responsible for gathering of data and treating with things such as suspicious financial transactions within our financial system that may be associated with things like money laundering or the proceeds of crime or illicit narcotics, etc., Mr. Speaker. And so it's absolutely crucial that the FIU itself is able to operate in an electronic era, is able to operate in a manner that allows for a lot of these suspicious transaction reports to be filed electronically. Because, Mr. Speaker, the storage of paper is a major challenge for the government. And many of the building spaces and so on are significantly limited. And so being able to host the system electronically will significantly improve the efficiencies of the Financial Intelligence Unit, as well as permit it to not have to deal with the space issues that it's already confronting when it comes to having to store significant paper reports. Mr. Speaker, under the Ministry of National Security, there's a recurrent item of approximately $4.5 million, a little less than $4.5 million. Mr. Speaker, this sum became necessary and was not appropriated in the initial budget because, Mr. Speaker, when we assumed office, what we found is that security contracts were being issued from various government ministries, departments, with no oversight. In fact, we saw in some instances where the same contractor was being paid twice by different ministries. And when we sought to get a comprehensive report of the amount of contractors, the fees being paid by contractors, being paid to contractors, who they were reporting to, who was supervising them, Mr. Speaker, it took an enormous amount of time and effort. And in some instances, we still were not being provided with information. Persons were being paid, there were no contracts, there was no documentation to support that. So in an attempt, Mr. Speaker, to rationalize this process and to bring all of the security contractors under a umbrella ministry, Cabinet approved a policy to have all of the security contracts be issued out of the Ministry of National Security. That allowed us, Mr. Speaker, to get a clear sense, first, of the number of contractors, two, of the rates that they were being paid, three, Mr. Speaker, for us to be able to assess their strengths and weaknesses and help some of these contractors to even understand basic things like how you prepare your invoice so that you will actually be paid properly by the Ministry of Finance. In doing so, Mr. Speaker, we discovered that there were some sites which were critical and did not have security, that required security. We also discovered, Mr. Speaker, that in fact the contractors were being paid beneath the minimum wage for security officers. And so, Mr. Speaker, without prompting, the ministry took the decision to comply with the law to ensure that the contractors are paid the minimum rate that are required for security officers. And as a result, Mr. Speaker, the sum of $4.5 million is required to address this issue. Mr. Speaker, the Ministry of Finance, which has the second which has actually the largest allocation as part of the appropriation, split into a recurrent of $7 million and a capital of $60 million. I will address the capital of $60 million, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, this is necessary because this administration has had to treat with a number of issues in coming into office. And I will start with the positive one. We've made it clear, Mr. Speaker, that we intend to construct a state-of-the-art, climate-smart teaching hospital that would allow us to truly begin the process of transforming Grenada's health sector. To do so, Mr. Speaker, you obviously need to have land upon which to build the hospital. Mr. Speaker, the government has negotiated and come to terms with Grenada Real Estate Corporation, which hitherto would have been known for the purposes of land as Grenada Distillers Limited. And the government has, and Cabinet has approved, the purchase of 89 acres of land from Grenada Real Estate Corporation, located at Calavini, St. George, which will become the site of this new teaching hospital. We have, and Mr. Speaker, we've acquired all 89 acres because we want to ensure that we have complete control of the immediate environment in which the hospital is going to be situated, particularly when it comes to being able to control the future development of the area. The site, incidentally as well, Mr. Speaker, also currently houses CARDI, the Caribbean Agricultural Research and Development Institute of the University of the West Indies, which has been occupying that site for several years, Mr. Speaker. And the government and previous governments have never regularized CARDI's possession occupation of the land, and it has been an ongoing issue with the owners of the land, CARDI and the government. And so, Mr. Speaker, we expect that by this acquisition we will also resolve this issue. Mr. Speaker, the purchase price for the land is $35 million. We have agreed to pay half of this in cash up front. The company has agreed to take the remaining half via bonds, which will be paid over a 7-year period. So it is not a case where, Mr. Speaker, it is all cash up front. We expect that all of the necessary legalese that comes with this will be concluded shortly so that we can get on, Mr. Speaker, with the nation's business of the construction of this hospital. And so, Mr. Speaker, the capital sum is required, is part of what is included in the $60 million. Second, Mr. Speaker, this government, Mr. Speaker, has taken a policy decision, which was a policy in practice going as far back as the founding father of this nation, Sir Eric Matugiri, that lands on Grandlands Beach and on the southern coast, which are prime lands for development, particularly in the tourist sector, should not be sold or alienated to private persons by way of freehold. And if you check the history of Grenada, Mr. Speaker, you would see that from Rex Grenadian, which is now Royalton, it's leasehold. You would see, Mr. Speaker, the old Flamboyant site, Flamboyant Hotel site, is leasehold. The site above it, which was leased to Mr. Lennox Griffith's family, is leasehold. The original Mount Cinnamon site, all of it, was leasehold. Spice Inn, leasehold. The site occupied by St. George's University, its original campus, leasehold. Koyaba, leasehold. Alamanda, leasehold. Radisson, and in all of its formations, because it's gone through a number of rebranding over the years, leasehold. The site where even the gas station is after Radisson, leasehold. The site that is now Crown City, formerly in the possession of South City, formerly in the possession of Mr. Debug, leasehold. The former administration, Mr. Speaker, an incredible decision to transfer to Time Buck Holdings Limited the freehold to the largest single parcel of land on Grandlands Beach, which houses the Radisson Hotel, in the hope that on transferring Grenada's patrimony that we would get some marketing from Mr. Lewis Hamilton, the renowned Formula One driver. That marketing has never happened. Second, Time Buck had committed to purchase the lease from Mr. Nicholas, Grenada Limited, in the hope that by acquiring the lease and by the government transferring the freehold for virtually no consideration, that the two will merge and that Time Buck will become the freehold owner of this 20 acres of land on the beach. It was clear, Mr. Speaker, that Time Buck Holdings had failed to purchase the lease from Mr. Nicholas. The former NDC administration, then led by Tillman Thomas, took the decision to reacquire the freehold from Time Buck Holdings. Time Buck Holdings challenged that decision and the matter was in court. When the former administration took office after 2013, it terminated the litigation and left Time Buck Holdings with the reversion to the freehold. So it left a company which never purchased the lease and which in any event clearly had no control over Lewis Hamilton himself and was unable to do any marketing for Grenada with the reversion to the freehold. The effect of which is that that company has been collecting $250,000 in rent, which is the people's money, which should have been going to the government and people of Grenada for the last several years. $250,000, $250,000. Time Buck Holdings, Mr. Speaker, it gets worse, took the decision that it would in fact recognize it, that it doesn't have possession of the hotel site because it never purchased the lease from Mr. Nicholas Grenada Limited. Took the decision in recent time, Mr. Speaker, that it was going to sell the freehold. And in fact, it approached Mr. Nicholas Grenada Limited to buy the freehold. The effect of which, Mr. Speaker, if it happened, is that an entire 20 acres of land would have become freehold in the hands of a private entity. Or worse yet, they could have sold it to somebody else other than Mr. Nicholas Grenada Limited, and that somebody else would then be collecting the rent. Mr. Speaker, we have taken the policy decision that any state or crown lands will only be transferred by a lease. And so, Mr. Speaker, we've had to take the painful decision to repurchase the freehold from Time Buck Holdings Limited. The sale agreement has been signed. The deposit is in the process of being paid. We'll complete this in an amicable manner, so that henceforth, going forward, it is the people of Grenada who will be the landlords to this site and will receive the rents. And when we say we are taking a policy, Mr. Speaker, we are going to go further. We are going to bring legislation in this Parliament to ensure that future governments, they'll have to be brave enough to come and repeal the legislation if they wish to outright sell lands on Grandlands Beach and on some of the key coastal areas where the Crown or the state still owns lands. And Mr. Speaker, let me explain why leases are important. Students of history will know that, for example, the Panama Canal was built by the Americans. Teddy Roosevelt invaded Panama, seized the Panamanians' land, and constructed the Panama Canal. In the usual American, perhaps arrogance, sometimes pomposity, I think he felt the Panama Canal was good for the world. And who were the Panamanians to be stopping progress. But there was one thing they did. They leased the land. They didn't annex it. They didn't buy it outright. So 100 years later, and for the record, many Grenadians and many persons from the OECS and the Caribbean went to Panama to build the Panama Canal, and many of them died in the swamps of the canal. And if you go to Panama today, you will meet descendants of Grenadians, Vincentians, Barbadians. 100 years later, Mr. Speaker, the canal reverted to the Panamanian people. They are running the Panama Canal, and they've since expanded it. If this land was annexed or sold to them freehold, they would never be able to do so unless they found money to buy it back. So, Mr. Speaker, when we have these leases, the leases allows the government and the people of Grenada to monitor the performance of the developers, to hold them to the conditions, and if they do not comply with them, it gives us the opportunity to terminate and to find other developers who are willing to do so. And I want to emphasize, Mr. Speaker, right, that we have examples of this. We have the leasehold site that formerly housed St. George's University. It is in a state of disrepair. The lease is coming up for renewal. If it was not leasehold land, do you think we could have tell the owners or the developers anything? It's freehold, it's their land, they could sit on it. But it's leasehold land, the lease is coming up for renewal. It gives the people and the government of Grenada the opportunity to now say to the developers, if you wish to renew this lease, you're going to have to develop this site. And that is in fact where we are, Mr. Speaker, because I have signaled that to them, they have gotten the message, and we've since received the concept, outline plans as to the development they intend to pursue there. If this was freehold land, we would not have been able to do so. So, Mr. Speaker, we've had to undergo the pain of repurchasing the reversion to the freehold for Radisson. We are well on our way to doing so, and going forward, the people of Grenada can rest assured that we therefore have not only the right to receive the rents, but also the ability to partner with the developer to ensure that the hotel itself is developed in a manner that we can all be proud of. If it was freehold, there is very little that you could have done outside of fiscal policy, etc., to address the type and quality of hotel that is there. Finally, Mr. Speaker, the sum also represents an appropriation for what we expect in a matter of a short period would be the Kawana Bay issue. As you're aware, Mr. Speaker, this administration placed Grenada in a position where exit proceedings were commenced against the state of Grenada by the developers of Kawana Bay, and the site has literally become a white elephant, prominently sticking out at the southern end of the Mont Rouge, southern end of the Grandlands Beach, northern end of the Mont Rouge cliff hillside. Mr. Speaker, we have been in sustained negotiations with the developers to bring this matter to a resolution. And we anticipate that we will be able to do so shortly. And so we are making the necessary appropriations in that eventuality, and it is therefore part of that $60,500,000 that is there. Mr. Speaker, I will say more on this on another occasion, because I think the people of Grenada needs to be told the kind of financial implications that they have been made to bear over several decisions taken by the former administration, which we now have to pay for, in relation to several projects. And so we will prepare the list, Mr. Speaker, and make it available so that the public itself can chew on those matters at the appropriate time. Mr. Speaker, I have highlighted the Ministry of Finance because obviously you would see $60,500,000 is the single largest appropriation set out there. And I thought it important, since my friends obviously had a little consternation over whether or not we would simply come and give a very redacted version of the presentation and not go into the details as to the estimates that are before them. And I did undertake, Mr. Speaker, at the committee that within 14 days we would provide even more detailed information. So this is, in effect, in the interest of time, Mr. Speaker, a snapshot of this. But we are quite happy, Mr. Speaker, to provide the details, because this is a government of transparency. Mr. Speaker, if I may briefly move on, I don't think I need to speak to the Ministry of Economic Development because my distinguished colleague from the constituency of St. Andrews Southwest has done so. Mr. Speaker, I will spend a little time on the Ministry of Infrastructure because there are several appropriations under the ministry. And I will just simply go through them in some detail. Mr. Speaker, there's a sum for $1 million to provide additional allocations for compensation for land acquisition. Mr. Speaker, as you're aware, once you are dealing with things like road repairs, road improvements, road expansions, that oftentimes you face the possibility of having to acquire private lands in order to treat with that. And by way of simple example, Mr. Speaker, we are seeking to, work has been delayed on the Cliff Woburn site, Mr. Speaker, because the designs which were provided were essentially the same thing, rebuild the road exactly as it is. Mr. Speaker, we all appreciate that there's significant construction taking place on the East Coast, which means large trucks, large trailer trucks traverse this route. Some of these corners are literally hairpin corners, and we have to improve the line of sight. We have to widen the road, in addition to dealing with rock and land slippage, as well as significant retaining walls. So it is likely, Mr. Speaker, that there are some private lands in the vicinity of where we are trying to widen the roads that we may need to acquire, and so it's important for us to have the allocation to make sure that if we get to the point where we have to acquire private citizens' lands, that we have the funds to do so. Mr. Speaker, the state of government buildings. Let me rephrase that. The state of state buildings, because when we speak of the government, we tend to speak of the executive. State buildings in Grenada is appalling. And we're in Parliament, and I want to make this point because since becoming Prime Minister, Mr. Speaker, I've begun to observe and I'm saying here the state's behavior when it comes to looking after the state's assets. And I think I completely understand why our buildings are in the appalling state they're in. It doesn't seem that we have respect for taxpayers' money. So we construct this fancy building, and we seem to think maintenance isn't important. So for months, I've had to suffer, and I think many of the colleagues who are using this building, with no air conditioning. You pass, you see the toilets out of service. You see leaks in the roof, nothing happening. And it goes on for months, then years. And then people have to deal with mold, hot, unbearable working conditions. I don't know why in a tropical country we use carpets. And it goes on and on and on. It is embarrassing. The workers can't work. They have to go home early. They walk in, they start losing their voices. It is as if we somehow think that by not taking care of our own assets, where people are required to work, where the public is required to come and obtain government services, that somehow miraculously, if we don't pay attention and take care of those things themselves, that somebody else will do it for us. So, Mr. Speaker, you go to the Supreme Court Registry Vault. The Supreme Court Registry Vault, which hosts litigation involving the state and criminals, litigation involving private citizens, people divorce papers, land title deeds, The entire history of Grenada from 1700 come up. And you're in there, Mr. Speaker, the entire roof is collapsing. The steel is falling apart. It is so hot you can't even stay inside of there. All of the records, you don't even have to touch them. They've gotten so brittle that the wind is actually destroying them. So for the past 25 years, Mr. Speaker, to a large extent, we have allowed government buildings to simply fall apart. The air conditioning system in the Ministry of Finance. The Minister of Finance is sitting in the Ministry of Infrastructure because there's no office for him. That is the state of affairs, Mr. Speaker. Because we have not maintained government buildings. We have not put the appropriate provisions for maintaining the government buildings. And so the little sum of $4 million which we have here as a supplementary appropriation, Mr. Speaker, is really, at best, I can't even call it scratching the surface, to address the significant challenges that the government, not us, that the state of Grenada is facing with the work environment. And the net effect of that, Mr. Speaker, is that you have to go and rent ad hoc buildings all over the place, from the police force to the Ministry of Health, Ministry of Finance, Inland Revenue Department, they're all over the place. Because there's been no